Hello and welcome into another edition of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. Now, if you're joining us on the audio form, you're thinking, hey, Dalton actually got back into the country. That's at least a good start to the show. But if you're joining us on the visual medium, you'll see the stark difference. Just like old times, the band is back together. How about it? We got Sam Sprunger, we got Tony Hollinsworth, and myself, Dalton Shetler. Gents, how we doing?
Good. Say, doing absolutely great. Dalton,
chemistry's already gone.
I know, it's already down the drain. Well, you didn't get. I don't think you got to see it, but last week we were talking about it. You know, we used to always joke how you magically found these vacation days. I also happened to find those vacation days too. So really, you and I are just bouncing back and forth. Sam's poor back is.
I guess we know where the talent comes from for this show, huh?
That's right. Like the common denominator that's been cruising steady this whole time.
That's right.
But we got a lot to get into, a lot of Big Ten basketball talk. I know Tony and Sam touched on this briefly a little bit, but some of the decisions were made because at the end of May, dawned the end of decision-making for many of the players that are deciding if they're going to stay in the NBA draft or come back to Big Ten basketball. We got a little bit clearer of a picture of what the Big Ten season is going to look like next year. And maybe we just start off with the very top.
Muddier?
See, I think it got clearer. I think in big part because I think there are two teams that without question, as we talk here in early June, sit at the top of the Big Ten basketball like tier system right now when you're looking at the rosters. Mm-hmm. And one is in East Lansing. And that's a big boost with Jaden Akins and A.J. Hoggard deciding that they're going to come back to East Lansing, as was kind of expected. But then the other team, I think, is the defending champs, residing in West Lafayette. They get the National Player of the Year to return. And this one, I thought that would be the case from the jump. But as the process went on, I started to wonder if Zach Edey was going to stay because I thought he was actually increasing his stock based on different reports that were out there on social media as the draft process went through. And ultimately, he still decides to come back to West Lafayette. And now I think we're talking 1A, 1B between these two teams as we sit in June.
Well, and we talked, Dalton, a couple weeks back that, those decisions hadn't been made, but we still thought that Michigan State and Purdue were at the top of the conference without any of those returning. Yeah. Like we just thought that they were still maybe not head and shoulders, but they were still the top two teams. And then everybody came back returning. Now, do you still feel, and we kind of agreed that if Edey comes back, it's Purdue, Michigan State. And if he didn't, it'd be Michigan State, Purdue, like in our feeling of 1 and 2 or 1A and 1B or whatever. Do you still feel that way? Do you still feel with Edey returning that Purdue is the favorite in comparison to the two?
I was going to say, I'm not sure that I actually gave a definitive 1 and 2. I know you felt that way. I said
that, and I think you agreed. I don't know that you went, yes, absolutely. I think you went, yeah, okay, I could agree with that.
I could see it. Like, I could see either way. Like,
sure, me too.
I understand the argument of Purdue wins the conference last year by 3 or 4 games. They bring back the National Player of the Year. They believe that their 2 freshman guards make a big jump between freshman and sophomore year. I could buy into all that and see Purdue. But I do also think if you buy into the freshman-sophomore leap, the jump that Michigan State's front court will be able to make with Jackson Kohler, when you talk about Carson Cooper as a role guy, and then you're talking about the number 4 recruiting class in the country, and you throw Xavier Booker right into that mix right away. You still have Mady Sissoko there in that rotation for the front court. I think that jump will be able to make a pretty big step. And honestly, again, I mean, that's why Purdue was able to beat Michigan State those 2 games. It was the front court mismatch, and Michigan State did its best against Zach Edey. Almost was able to get the win in East Lansing, but there was a wider gap. I think that gap will start to close a little bit, not because Edey's stepping back by any means, but I think the Spartans are going to take a big jump. But you surround that with Tyson Walker back, Hoggard back, and Walker really got into his own going towards the home stretch of that year. Jaden Akins, who I think is an NBA prospect, and you throw in Jeremy Fears as a freshman guard. You throw in Cone Carr. That's a name that's going to be a lot of fun to watch because this guy is going to be a highlight reel for this upcoming season as a freshman. But my point just is I think both teams are so stacked in talent I'm really not leaning one way or another the first week of June. I'm sure I'll talk myself into one.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if it was me laughing that muted you a little bit, but we didn't hear maybe a little bit of that last part that you just had in there.
I just said that I'm
good.
really just kind of on the fence at this point. I mean, here in the first week of June, I'm sure I'll find somewhere to land.
Tony and I talked last week that, with Purdue, with having Edie there now, you can if Matt Painter decides he wants to play 2 7+ footers at the same time, it's not as easy. Or even if he does what he did with Trevion Williams and Edie, it's not as easy to just say, okay, we're going to put a big guy out there to take care of the big guys, because William Berg, who is 7'2", is nothing like Zach Edey is on the court.
More of a stretch.
Yeah, he's a stretch. He's versatile. He can shoot the long jumper. He can take people off the dribble. So, like, their teams are going to struggle trying to guard those 2 7+ footers individually. Plus, you have, like you mentioned, Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. Fletcher.
Yes, Fletcher.
Fletcher. I don't know why I wanted to call him his brother's name. Fletcher Lawyer. They're sophomores now. That jump, they're going to be a better backcourt now. But then you also throw Miles Colvin in there. And
I was going to say, I think you're missing maybe the most important part, and that's sprinkling some more athleticism into that Purdue backcourt. Yep. I think that's the most important piece.
Yeah, and I don't remember the kid's name that transferred in. He's going to be a senior this year. I cannot off the top of my head recall, but he transferred in. So he's kind of taken that leadership role as a senior, moving in there into the backcourt as well. That will help those sophomores. So. And I'm not trying to argue with you. I agree. No. These two teams are going to be extremely talented and loaded, like not just in the Big Ten. I think they're going to be loaded nationally. Tony, go ahead. I know you had something there.
I know. Well, I was going to say, if you guys remember to last year when we brought up the same question, that was a lot of what we had was who did we kind of have as the big favorites in the Big Ten. And I know Dalton and all of us had talked about how we thought it was going to kind of be a down year for the Big Ten, and it was to an extent, because you had all the talent at Iowa with Murray, you had Wisconsin, coming back, you had Michigan State is always there because of the history and because of Tom Izzo, and Purdue, having also been very highly ranked the year before. But
in fairness, nobody expected Purdue to do much.
No, they didn't. Not to do as much as they did. Now, to me, the picture is much more clear. But to me, this year is going to be more of a down year for the Big Ten, with the exception of Michigan State and Purdue. Like obviously, as we can see, the cream is kind of floated to the absolute top. Everybody else is kind of murky. What does IU do now with
Trace Jackson Davis?
Jackson Davis. I was like, it's right there. I'm missing it. With Trace Jackson Davis being gone, Iowa now has lost Murray. Wisconsin, can they potentially rebound? I know we talked about one of the Northwestern players returning. Can Northwestern kind of continue its, at least winning tradition?
I think they make the tournament a second year if they perform. With Boo Booey back, I think that is huge for them.
Boy, Audige is such a blow, though, because Audige stayed in the NBA draft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, he was the defensive backbone of what they did this year.
I still, but still, I think that there's probably enough for Northwestern. Audige, it did kind of surprise me that he didn't come back, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, Tony, go ahead.
And what kind of disappointed me a little bit, the outstanding freshman for Ohio State, again, I can't remember his name either.
Bryce Sensabaugh.
He declared for the NBA draft. And I'm like, wait a minute. We don't even get to see him for like 2-3 years. We just get to see him his freshman year and he's gone. So
he was great as a freshman, though. He just got his team, his surroundings kind of let him down. You saw how good Ohio State could have been in the Big Ten tournament. They played really, really well. And you're like, where's this been all season? And that's just it. That 14 game stretch that they were 2-12 in or whatever, or 1-13, that screwed them over big time.
And honestly, I'm kind of surprised. I saw a couple like college basketball pre-rankings about 3 weeks ago or so. They had Ohio State in the top 5 as far as the Big Ten goes, which which a little bit surprising, especially with him gone. I was like, okay, well, it's one of those I'll kind of believe it when I see it type things. But still, overall, I don't think the Big Ten's going to be bad. But I would put a lot of the Big Ten teams, with the exception of Purdue and Michigan State, kind of in the mid level, because I don't expect a lot from Michigan either this year. And again, I want to clarify, because Sam said I'm
said
saying
Rutgers
Rutgers is going to win it all. I
Win
did
it
not
all.
say that. I said they were going to be a
Big Ten
dark
champions.
horse.
2024 champion.
Dark horse.
So, but I will say Tony's like gloss over, not necessarily gloss over, but overview or whatever of the Big Ten this upcoming season is right. There's going to be a power shift. Last year was all about parity. I mean, everybody from 2 to 12 was 10-10, like going towards that end stretch, or right in that mix. And this year, that parity and that mid-level is going to be gone a bit. And you have two teams, because heading into last year, Indiana was the preseason favorite, but like in the national rankings, they were maybe top 15 in some of the different people's predictions. Yeah. Michigan State and Purdue are both top 5, almost consensus when it comes to preseason predictions in the country right now.
Both of them are 1 seeds. Both of them are 1 seeds in like the extremely early bracketology. Like they're both 1 seeds. Like that's insane going from last year to this.
It's a total shift in power in that regard. But that kind of does bring me to a question. Well, except first we'll pin Tony down before we move on, because Tony started to wade through the waters of some of these other programs. And I want to do that. But Michigan State, Purdue, maybe you can be a little bit more brave than I am. At this point, first week of June, who would you be favoring?
Out of favoring, just based off of at least past regular season success, I would give it to Purdue at the current moment, just because you have a lot more of the experience. You have a lot more of those returning players at the moment. With Michigan State, they have a lot of the same. They have a lot of returning key pieces, but they also have a lot of new freshman star power that they're going to have to rely on to actually live up to those expectations for us to actually see. Plus, Purdue has the returning National Player of the Year. So to me, I would give Purdue a slight edge in that. I'm not going to say it's like a whirlwind of difference, but
right
just
there,
based off of experience,
Rutgers and Purdue, number 1 and number 2 in the Big Ten. Straight from
that's your quote. I did not say that's your quote, sir. You put the.
Since you both like the Boilers a little bit, I'll go ahead and cape up then for the Michigan State side, so we at least have a little bit of a balance here in voice. And I will say,
I don't think it's out of. I'm not saying it's clear cut.
No, I know that we're leaving a lot of room for nuance, but I will cape up a little bit more, because like Michigan State does have the number 4 national recruiting class coming in, and you expect to see some of those freshmen but I'll argue a little bit with what Tony said. I don't think they're necessarily counting on those freshmen, because Malik Hall is coming back. Between Hall, Walker, Hogard, the front court still with Kohler, Cooper got so many minutes, Trey Holloman still in the mix. Like there's a lot of veteran leadership still on that squad, because the first round, we didn't even mention Malik Hall coming back. And I know Sam had thrown out here, and this is a weird hypothetical to analyze at this point, but if William Berg's out there on the floor at the same time Zach Edey is, Hall's somebody who can stretch the floor a bit as a big guy too. Not that he's 7 foot, but you get what I'm saying.
Right.
He supplies a versatility factor that this team kind of needs, and a veteran factor that this team needs. So I do think there's a lot of talent coming in, but I don't think it's an exclusive reliant for Michigan State to be on. I just think this is a well-rounded squad, and I think you paired Tom Izzo as the head of that snake, and that's a dangerous thing for the rest of the Big Ten.
Now, I can tell you that it will be one hell of a good Big Ten season and then Big Ten tournament.
Yep,
for sure.
If this pans out the way that we expect it to.
Now there is one question I have for you, Dalton, because and you and I have talked about this even in past shows. And kind of
Rutgers too, okay?
Stop it. We've talked about
Nebraska last year. He's not doing it this
year. We talked about it, last year, whatnot. The kind of the biggest thing that really hurt Michigan State was themselves with the undisciplined. A lot of the fouls. There are a lot of these guys getting 3 and 4 fouls kind of early on in the game. Coach Izzo's having to take them out and really save them until it really matters the most, and then make the most of that and pray that they don't get fouled again. Do you think that's something that hopefully now that they're coming back season, it is a new season, Do you think that maybe gets fixed up and touched a little bit? Not saying they're going to be perfect, and they are going to have some of those, those bad games and tempers flare and bad calls and whatnot. But that to me is what really has worried me about Michigan State the last couple of years. They're a talented team. They can hang with the best. And we saw last year, they almost beat a lot of the top teams. They were in very close contention, but it was the foul trouble that was really hurting them, because it's like, all right, foul, teams going to the free throw line. Michigan State's got to play from behind, basically.
Well, and I would say you're right. They did almost beat a lot of top teams, and in an attorney, they handled Marquette, and then they almost had Kansas State, but Kansas State just had a game of destiny. Like they just flat out a game of destiny. It was a phenomenal game, but they just were made for that. I feel like some of those foul issues were shored up towards the end of that season when they started to make that run. I thought the defense dramatically improved, because they went through a wave where they were great offensively, but lackluster defensively, and then it shifted. And at the end, they were able to actually pair them together a bit, which was great. But I think what you're talking about with the foul issues, I think that's where it gets important to talk about the front court, as we did earlier on here at the top of the program, because Jackson Kohler comes back now as a sophomore, and maybe one of the biggest issues he had, or weaknesses in his game, if you want to point at, was just maybe conditioning. I think he gets a little bit more in shape and into his sophomore year, just kind of fills out a little differently. Cooper really started to come on, build a lot of confidence. I think Madi Sissoko's still there, but then you throw in Xavier Booker, who's a top 10 national recruit and a really composed freshman into that mix. Just having more bodies to work with. You throw Malik Hall in that mix a little bit. I think that makes a big difference when you talk about those foul issues, because there's depth now. And I believe with that freshman to sophomore jump for both Cooper and Kohler, there will also be a trust factor that can be counted on there with them, that freshmen just don't usually have that same leash. And I think it'll be able to shore up because of the depth.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's go ahead and segue. So we've analyzed a lot about 1 and 2, right? Michigan State, Purdue. Yeah. Tony started to hit on some of these other programs, and we could start with Tony here in a minute, because I'm curious who you all have as number 3 in the Big Ten rankings right now, because you look at each scenario, and I kind of have a hard time picking one. We can kind of go through them. Illinois, I'll go alphabetical order so I don't get lost. Illinois gets Terrence Shannon Jr. and Coleman Hawkins back at the NBA draft deadline. That's a big boost in Champaign.
Yeah.
Indiana loses Trace Jackson Davis, as Tony said. Also loses Jalen Hood-Schifino to the draft. They get Xavier Johnson back. They also get the big man Ware from Oregon. He transfers in. That's a big boost for Bloomington. And then Iowa, as Tony mentioned, Murray's gone. How do they kind of work without Murray in that high-scoring offensive system? We'll have to find out. Maryland gets Dante Scott and Jameer Young back in College Park. Then you go to Michigan. Michigan's having a tough one, because Michigan loses Hunter Dickinson to Kansas. They lose Jet Howard and Kobe Buffkin to the NBA draft. They go after Caleb Love, and the move gets axed, we presume, or it's reported by Michigan admissions, have been seeing out there. But they did just land Olivier Kamwa, the Tennessee transfer, just a short little bit ago. He was the leading rebounder for the Vols last year, 5 a game, average 11 points a game. Don't know if that's going to be enough. We already talked about Michigan State. Minnesota, man, there's a lot there. And they lost Jamison Battle. He went to Ohio State. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But then you have Nebraska getting Keisei Tominaga back. Do you believe enough in that? Northwestern gets Boo Buie back. We touched on Ohio State. Penn State's in a new situation under Mike Rhodes. What do they look like, losing all that veteran leadership they had? We talked about Purdue. Then it's Rutgers. Rutgers is interesting because Omori returns after the NBA draft deadline, but Spencer hits the transfer portal, and reports are pointing him to UConn. And Paul Mulcahy, it looks like, is not a guarantee to come back to Piscataway. Things are interesting there.
Is he entering is he going into the portal?
And from what I can see, I was reading up on this during this week. It appears that he hasn't made a decision where he's going to be. So I presume he is in the portal, with that being said. And then finally, Wisconsin keeps a lot of the core together. Tyler Wall's back. Hepburn's back. Asijan's back. It's a lot of those same pieces from a year ago. So that's my Spark Notes version of each Big Ten team. Having heard that, Who do you like right after Michigan State and Purdue?
Go ahead, Tony.
I would give it to Illinois. Illinois had a really solid year last year. They get those two really good returning players. And I mean, you think about it. Illinois gave Michigan State a good run for their money last year. They gave Purdue a good run for their money. I would honestly replace them as kind of the new IU this year. Like, they have the talent, they have the experience. I would put them as probably my 3. For my 4, I'm going to go with Rutgers. 4. Casey,
Really?
I heard
4
win.
Rutgers.
Number 1.
4.
For the win is what I heard.
No. I'm going to put Rutgers at my 4 just as a dark horse. And then my 5th, I'm going to put Maryland. Again, I'm going to go with Rutgers and Maryland kind of being my 2 dark horse teams again. There's something about Maryland that it's like, it's a hard environment to play in. They've been getting a lot of really talented guys. They've been taking teams down the absolute wire. Maryland is one of those, to me, they're the most interesting to watch. And then probably right under them, if not maybe even interchangeable, I'd probably put Northwestern. And then everybody else to me is just kind of a toss wash up. You could put them really anywhere. With the exception of Minnesota, I think Minnesota is going to be at the bottom again. Poor Minnesota.
No, I would agree with that.
I think
Sam?
Penn State's going to be down there with Minnesota this year.
That's fair.
I 1 and 2, Purdue, Michigan State, whichever way you want to put it. I think you've got Wisconsin and Maryland fighting over for 3 and 4. Okay. And then Ohio State is still gonna. You know what? They weren't horrible. The pieces around Sensabaugh are not bad pieces. Mm-mm. They just, for whatever apparent reasons, they struggled. And yes, they don't have the exact. They don't have that star power of Sensabaugh coming back, but they've got Battle coming. Battle was the one bright thing in Minnesota, like that. So I would say that they're them and Illinois probably fight for my number 5. So like those are my top 5.
Well, it's interesting to me, and I by the way, I'm on the Maryland train with both of you. I think Maryland's going to be up there competing, and I think Tony touched on it a little bit. There's a different energy in College Park since Kevin Willard's gotten there. And what was the quote I read? I think it might have been from John Fanta, who said that Maryland basketball felt like Maryland basketball for the first time in a while this past year, and that's saying something for what's cooking there in College Park.
For those that don't remember, they used to, wreak havoc in the ACC, and like it was horrible to go to it was the Kohl Center, wasn't it, or something like that? I forget what the name of the place was.
Kohl Center's Wisconsin.
That's right. Before they went into their new arena.
They're in Xfinity Center now. I can't remember what the old name was.
Yeah, I can't, but it was basically just a smaller gym. Like and it was horrible for teams to go into play. I mean, I can remember watching ESPN and Duke would go in there and struggle mightily. UNC would struggle mightily. So that is the Maryland I used to remember from the day.
I think Maryland's there. I like Wisconsin as well. The team I'm interested. I'm also a bit with Tony on Illinois. I'm curious to see how this works out, because the complete turnover that last year was obviously didn't quite pan out. But a couple of those pieces stick around for another year, and Terrence Shannon being one of those pieces. Mm-hmm. I'm curious to see how that plays and if that carries some momentum. But what's fascinating to me, out of the top 5 that both of you listed, nobody said Indiana. I found that interesting. Nobody believes in the Hoosiers.
The fact that they lost their top 2 and they're such a huge amount of their top scoring, defense, rebounding, all that. Yeah. I don't see IU getting up into that top 5. I just don't see it happening.
And plus we really saw them struggle even with them in the lineup a lot of times. It was like, man, and there's a lot of times that's what we asked, especially at the beginning of the year. IU started off so hot, then they fall off a little bit in the middle of the season. We're like, wait a minute, what's happening to IU right now? To me, that is probably what we're going to expect to see this season out of IU, is a lot of these very much like, wait a minute, it's there. They could do it if they can get everything to click together and work. But I think a lot of our questions is going to be, what's going on in Bloomington? What do they have to do to get this fixed?
I think IU's biggest problem last year is they couldn't get both of them clicking at the same time. I mean, look at the game against
Agreed.
Purdue in West Lafayette. If it wasn't for Hood Schifino, Trace Jackson Davis didn't show up for the first 30 minutes of the game.
They were extremely inconsistent.
Yeah,
I mean,
if they
just
both would have clicked at the same time, IU could have made a huge run in that tournament. I mean, they just could have, and they just never both clicked at the same time. And I think that's why I have Illinois down at the bottom of my top 5, if at all, because they struggled to that was Brad Underwood's biggest concern last year was, well, we still haven't gelled. And that was in the Big Ten tournament.
Right.
Now, I get it. It's, there's more time. Time heals all wounds. And it might gel, but still, it's just still that concern of, are they going to put it together like we were thinking they could? Well, like they were predicted. They were predicted to be one of the top 2 teams in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my concern with Illinois. And, I just don't think IU has enough to get up into that top 5. I'm not saying they can't make the tournament. I'm not saying they can't win some games or beat some teams on the top part. I just don't think they've got enough to consistently stay up there.
Well, and that's kind of the beauty of what we're talking about here is, I mean, teams 3 through, whatever you want to make as actual competitors or contenders in the Big Ten, they all have question marks. I mean, all those programs we ran through, there are glaring question marks on. But I do, if I had to pick, I'm going Maryland, Wisconsin as 3 and 4, and struggling maybe with the 5th. I might land on Illinois. But it's a struggle to kind of form out the 5. Not too many of us, well, Tony mentioned them, I think, for a moment, but Northwestern, not too many of us believe in the Wildcats can strike back again like this.
I don't think they've got enough, much like IU, to stay up at the top part of it. I think they're going to perform. They're going to beat teams that they shouldn't. Use air quotes, that they shouldn't, but I think they're probably still going to make the tournament. I mean, they may be a bubble team or just off.
Which, by the way, if they make the tournament, it's only happened 2 times in school history. It's
never happened back to back. It's never
right.
happened back to back. So, this would be you might as well give Collins a lifetime contract, because he's done it back to back years. But yeah, I think they're much like IU, maybe on a lesser level of talent.
Well, that's why I kind of put them at 6. I don't really have them as a top 5 team, but I think for sure in the Big Ten, because of where we have question marks and everybody else, I would for sure put them as a top 10 team, much to Sam's point. They're going to beat teams that they, quote unquote, shouldn't beat. Again, they're bringing some pieces back. They've lost a couple big pieces, but I think there's still enough there for them to at least be successful enough to be able to go into the Big Ten.
Last year, they lost Nance and the guy that went to IU, and they ended up getting second in the conference. So, maybe addition by subtraction.
Well, right? That's what surprised me so much about last year in the offseason when Nance went to North Carolina and Ryan Young went to Duke. I thought that was a year. Yeah, I thought that was it. And then for them to turn it around, and they changed the way they played. It was a defensive style first. That's why I wonder how it plays this year, because Audige was a lot of that engine defensively. He was the one in the passing lanes mixing things up, but I also think it doesn't take remarkable talent to play defense. As I've heard it said before, defense is about 2 things: effort and angles. That's it. It's knowing where you're supposed to be and giving a heck of a lot of effort. You don't have to be a 5-star to be able to fit and play defensively. And in the league where we're talking about, there's a lot of, I don't know if the word mediocrity is fair, but where we're really not sure who contends after Michigan State and Purdue, defense could be an advantage or an edge that takes you and carries you a ways.
Yeah. And you're right. You say it so simply, angles and effort. And yes, you're right. Now, that's not taking away from those that do it at an excellent level, but you're absolutely right. If you get enough effort, you can play adequately enough on defense that it's going to come out okay.
Yeah, if you're going to be a game changer with steals and blocks, then you throw in instinct, you throw in some of those things. Right. But just to play sound defensively and good defense, effort and angles, that's all you need.
Man, ball, basket.
So I don't know. I kind of believe in Collins to be able to do that. Now, this is where it's interesting. Another coach I believe in, but I don't necessarily believe they're going to have the same success this upcoming year. But Tony does is Rutgers. I believe in Steve Peichel, but I really am not exactly sure what we're going to be seeing this year. Now, to Tony's help, Omori comes back, leaves the NBA draft, will come back to Piscataway, but losing Spencer and maybe losing Mulcahy, like I think there's some serious question marks there at Rutgers.
Well, and last week we talked about it, and we said that he pulled out of the draft. We didn't see that he didn't commit back to Rutgers though.
Yeah, when we saw it, I saw it was like, okay, he pulled out of the draft, and I'm assuming between both of us, or at least the article was reading, like, okay, he pulled out of the draft. Again, we hadn't heard anything about him transferring. Natural assumption, okay, he's coming back to Rutgers. That's two big pieces that they need to come back. Like,
well, and you know what? As a Purdue fan, I'm okay with everybody leaving from Piscataway. It's fine. I don't mind.
The Purdue Slayers, as we'll call them.
Well, and I like Steve Peichel too. I like what he does coaching wise and stuff, but sometimes, well, I mean, how many years of losing enough of his talent is going to take it away to where, excuse me, he can't, he can't produce the way he has. I mean, you lose Ron Harper Jr. the year before last year, and
Geo Baker.
Yeah, Geo Baker. And then this year, after the last year's season, if Mulcahy leaves, that's going to be it's going to be detrimental to them. I think, really. I mean, Amori's good, but what else is there?
And they worked so well as a team. They had so many great pieces. When Meg was healthy, I mean, that's when Rutgers was at its best, because defensively they had a presence in Meg, and you threw Omori with it, able to finish. Mulcahy dropping dimes. Spencer, a shot creator and able to create the offense in some ways. Like, they just flowed together. And you start removing those pieces, it's not enough individual talent to be able to win. It's going to take some shape shifting there for the Scarlet Knights.
Well, it is what it is, right?
Well, let's go ahead and move then to Tony's other favorite team and state, Wisconsin. If we got the eye roll on cue, Tony was ready to dismiss that. But with the Badgers, they get Tyler Wall back. Chucky Hepburn's back. Connor Essegian makes a jump from freshman to sophomore year.
And he was a damn good freshman.
Absolutely was. I believe made all freshman team, correct?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And I think he was 4th in freshman of the year voting.
Yeah. So I mean, and there's other pieces as well. Like this Wisconsin team that, as we talked earlier in the year with a Badger alum, Charlie Willis, right?
Charlie Willis. Yeah.
Willis. Thank you.
Willis.
But we talked with him, and he had said in that interview that he almost hopes that this team just misses the tournament and it becomes that motivator, that inspiring factor for the squad. Well, the squad's back. They didn't make that tournament. Is that enough?
One heck of a run in the NIT.
They did, but is that enough for Guard in them to turn this into maybe a top 4 team in the Big Ten? I think so. What do you guys think?
I think so. I mean, I honestly think that they'll fight over 3rd with Maryland. I like Maryland. I really like Maryland a lot, but Maryland still has those question marks of going on the road. To me, they're unbeatable at home, and on the road they're hit or miss.
But by the way, other big piece of Maryland, since we talked about him a little bit, I didn't throw in there. Julian Reese is staying in College Park too. That's a big one. So continue.
Yeah, but with them, that's why in Wisconsin, I like Greg Gard. I like that what they have returning. They're 1 year older, like you said. Charlie said that he hoped that they missed the tournament, so it would be that driving force. We're not going to miss it again this year, and I think it would be. I would be more shocked, honestly, if Wisconsin misses the tournament than if Maryland were to finish 5th. Like it just would blow my mind if Wisconsin didn't just be back with a vengeance. I honestly, it would be a shock to me.
Totally with that. Tony, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree. I think the year before was kind of Wisconsin had such a great success the year before. And then last year, I think they kind of tried to play off of that success. And I think it came back to bite them a little bit this year. Again, as much as I am reluctant to admit it, I think because they have all these pieces coming back, they have the experience. And again, they were doing decently well. Again, it was one of those, we were looking at Wisconsin and we were asking ourselves, what do they have to do to get themselves over the hump to be able to get to this point where, they're really contending in the Big Ten. Much to your guys' point, even though I didn't rank them in my top 5, I could very easily see Wisconsin kind of coming up and sneaking in there and really duking it out with Maryland to be able to really take that third spot, as much as that pains me to admit that the state of Wisconsin may or may not be successful.
Well, and just in case we don't get to this one, as we talk about some of the competitors, because I think they might take a step. How big of a step, I don't really know. But one of the most refreshing piece of news that kind of came out from these NBA decisions, Keisei Tominaga coming back to Lincoln, Nebraska.
I may get a
this
jersey.
Had me fired up. He is so fun to watch. I am so excited that he's coming back to Nebraska.
Well, and we talked last week when we were talking about him coming back and what kind of player he was. He's not the best player in the conference. He's just not. We're not delusional of that, but he is such an influence on the team. He literally steps across the half court line, he's looking for his shot.
Yep.
But yet he doesn't have to take it there. He can drive to the hoop and do some circus job that just blows your mind. But we talked also that what was it, I think it was February 1st of right before the Big Ten tournament.
That sounds right. Yeah.
He was the highest scoring player in the country, not the Big Ten, the country. That was, and number 2 was Zach Edey. So he was better than the national player of the year for a full solid month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think if I remember right, the first time I really kind of paid attention and watched him, it was the game against Northwestern. He had 22 points. I remember watching him. He's just nailing threes with no problem. And then they put him on the bench. I'm like, whoa, what are y'all doing? No, put him back. This is your only chance. Put him back in.
Hey, the mayor knows what he's doing, all right?
Right. But yeah, I mean, we talked about it from, February 1st until, March 5th. He only had 2 games where he, the highest he had was 11 points. Other than that, at minimum, he was scoring 20 points or more. Against Penn State, he dropped 30. So, I mean, he's a fantastic basketball player. So
he can explode at stupid numbers.
And that's the thing. He's got a little bit of a Steph Curry charisma to him as well, or likability factor.
30 though too.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he's a small guy where you just kind of relate to, hey, there's 7-footers out here, and here's this little guy just draining it on him. And it just there's a factor, there's a likability to Keisei. So I'm so excited that he's coming back. We'll get to see him more in the Big Ten.
You want to know what's crazy? This poor guy is 6'2". I'm an inch taller than he is, and you're talking about, look at this little guy. Just look how little cute he is.
I'm
He's
5'11".
on the basketball court.
Big Ten basketball, man. It is a beast in terms of height.
Yes.
I am so happy. I know that we've got football coming up, but I cannot wait for this basketball season to come. It just cannot come soon enough, and yet I want it to not hurry because I want this football season to come too, because I think there's going to be some really good stuff happening there. But I am so jacked for this basketball season.
Well, here, and this is the funny thing about it too, because we've talked Big Ten basketball for almost 40 minutes now, and you bring up Big Ten football for a moment. And everybody's, if we dose a bit of truth serum in front of each one of your faces right now, what do you believe Big Ten football season comes down to?
Michigan, Ohio State.
Yep.
I mean, does it feel like we're waiting 14 weeks to see what happens in Ann Arbor on that November Saturday, and then whoever wins it will cakewalk through Indianapolis and go to the college football playoff? Maybe both can fit back in like they did last year. There doesn't seem to be enough drama to it. And what's funny about it too, and I understand the hypocrisy in this, because we're talking Big Ten basketball and we're like, oh, who's 1 or 2? Is it Michigan State or Purdue? And we're kind of doing that with football, but with football or with basketball, those teams are going to lose. Michigan
Yeah.
State and Purdue are going to lose games in the Big Ten Conference. Like, that's just the nature of it. Where football, I mean, we might be seeing 2 undefeateds at the end of the year.
Yeah.
More than likely, we are.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a chance that either one of them could get tripped up. It happens, it just does. But more than likely, probably 8 out of 10 chance that both of them go into that weekend after Thanksgiving undefeated.
Wait, does Appalachian State come to Michigan again?
Those were the days. Those were the days.
But no, to me, I'm a little bit more hesitant to really admit that, because to me, the biggest question for Ohio State football, and I think probably all of our, or at least most of our big questions, and even for Ohio State fans specifically, is McCord the next guy? After Fields, after Haskins, after Stroud, is he the guy that is truly going to lead the Buckeyes? And we only have so much to go off of because he only played a few snaps last year. And we can only see really a small amount in spring games because there's only so much you can really do with that. So to me, that's the big question is, yes, all the talent is there. They still have Ibuka. They still have Marvin Harrison Jr. The defense is still there. They still kept the defensive coordinator. Can McCord truly lead the offense to be just as prolific as it was last year?
Let's look at it this way. Honestly, I don't think it matters until they play Michigan.
That's what I was going to ask. I think it's a fair question, Tony, but
it is.
Even if McCord is struggling, I mean, do you see many? Who do you think from the Big Ten this upcoming season could get Ohio State with even a struggling McCord? I suppose I'd pose the question that way.
I don't know.
Maryland, maybe, because I mean Maryland gave them a big struggle last year. They still have Talia.
They also have them at the Horseshoe this year rather than in College Park.
Yeah, that's fair. So I mean Penn State to me took a big drawback. Sean Clifford's not there. They lost a lot of key pieces. Joey Porter on defense to the draft.
They've been clamoring, though, for Drew Aller to take Sean Clifford's. A lot of Penn State fans have been clamoring for Aller to take that job anyway, though. So some Penn State fans are pretty excited about it.
Let's think about this, though. We were asking the same question about Michigan last year.
Yeah.
And saying, you know what? It's probably not going to matter until they play Ohio State.
Yeah.
And I think we're in the same car, just a different driver this year. I don't know that it's going to matter. And like I said, it can happen, and it could happen, but it also could happen that both of them get beat and they go in 1 loss each going into that last, so, but I think it's just one of those that I don't know that it's going to matter until they play Michigan at the end of the season. I honestly don't.
Well, let me pose this question here, too. Do we believe that moving forward after this year, when USC and UCLA come into the conference, do we believe that USC will be able to enter that wrinkle that we're currently talking about, this kind of 2-team stalemate?
I think they create a second tier. Maybe,
but you don't have them on the same there with them.
Not yet. They went through a really long time where they kind of struggled in and out. They haven't been in the college playoff for a really long time.
And not to cut you off, but just to be fair, it wasn't a gradual ascension. They just hired Lincoln Riley, and here came Caleb Williams, and all of a sudden, boom, they're a national contender again.
That's true.
They're there now. All of a sudden,
I'm not saying that it's not possible. I think right at the beginning, unless they just win the national championship this year coming, and how crazy would that be? The national champion switches conferences to come in. but I don't know that I'm gonna say that. But my point is I think maybe to start out, they may work their way into where it becomes to where they're on par with them. But I just think when they come in, they're maybe the step below Michigan and Ohio State, and then maybe they can work their way back up.
Yeah, I agree. And I say that mainly because looking at who Lincoln Riley is as a coach and looking at his last, 4 or 5 years with Oklahoma and USC both, he's not only had the advantage of, getting a plethora of extremely talented quarterbacks. The thing that has killed Lincoln Riley every single year is he basically has zero defense out on the field. And that's one thing that you absolutely have to have in the Big Ten. You can have a prolific offense, but all you need is just one stop. That's all you need to do is get one stop. And it's like a wet paper bag has more defense than USC's defense half the time. And that's what blows my mind. And plus too, what also makes me think that they're going to be a step down is because they're going to lose Caleb Williams. I don't know much about USC's backup quarterback, and it's hard to replace someone like Caleb Williams. So, will Lincoln Riley be able to find that next, gem or diamond in the rough, whatever you want to call it?
He only had 2 Heisman Trophy winners at Oklahoma.
Only 2. And then, Jalen Hurts transferred in from Bama. So,
and he was a contender for the Heisman. I mean,
right?
Tony created a funny visual, though, for me when we get to October of Big Ten football and USC's matching up with, say, Iowa. And he's got a star quarterback, and the offense is just dying to get on the field. And he's like, why have we not touched the ball in a quarter? Why have we not seen that side of the field? He's just shaking on the sideline. And then as soon as he gets ready to get the ball back, a punter pins him within the 3-yard line. And he goes, there goes the play sheet series. Like, we got to throw it out now. This is a great idea to see happen.
I can't wait for Iowa and USC to play, because it's going to be offense and no defense against the defense and no offense. It's going to be 6-3, and it's not going to be at all entertaining.
And can we make a petition right now? Keep Ferentz for one more year just for that matchup.
You mean
Keep
Bryant,
Ferentz
right?
as the OC for one more year so we can see it happen.
Well, all he has to do is average 25 points a game, and he'll be fine.
And he's solid.
It reminds me so much of, and this is really going to trigger some Michigan State fans, so much of the 2018 year in the Red Box Bowl, when Michigan State, with its top 5 nationally ranked defense, gets into the Red Box Bowl at 6-6, goes against Oregon, quarterbacked by Justin Herbert, and shut Herbert down. Oregon only gets 7 points in the game, but Michigan State couldn't score. They finished with 6. So 7-6, Oregon wins that game. You held an all-pro quarterback to just one deep ball, and it couldn't win the game. Like, that's what we're going to be seeing here in these future matchups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Now, I do say, I do want to, put one more petition out there. When USC and Michigan State face, can it please be for like a Spartan shield, for like a dagger, something? You've got the Trojans versus the Spartans. It cannot get any better than that.
They've played in the Rose Bowl before. Chill out.
It needs a trophy.
But it should be for a trophy.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Because of the Spartan
versus Trojan. It needs its own thing.
How about a horse?
Shield.
Well, it needs something that's like completely like off the chart. So like we're thinking Trojan, Spartan, but like, how Ohio State and Illinois gets together and they play over a turtle, the Illabuck. Like, let's do something like that.
The gold sandal, because they both wear sandals. The gold sandal. Calling it.
How about the big fluffy thing right there on the
the festoon?
Yeah.
How did you know that name?
Really stupid. When I was in the military and I was in my specific unit, we had what we called the Praetorian symbol, which is essentially was a Spartan helmet. And we had to know each color, like the red festoon, the big fluffy part. We had to know the blue background and the yellow to go with us. That's the only reason why I know it's
impressive.
The golden festoon. How about
there we go. The golden festoon.
That was impressive. Okay, so now we've solved that. We'll move to what I believe will be our final.
I think for Purdue and UCLA,
it's got to be a Wood Trophy.
Well, his famous picture when he was at Purdue, Wooden was at Purdue. He had his key in the shoelaces of his shoe. I think it should be a sneaker with a golden key in it.
That's a good idea. I can get down with that.
Yeah. Anyways,
that should be a show in the coming months as we get ready for kickoff. We're just going to build rivalry trophies for the additions that are happening with conference expansion. That'll be great.
Then maybe a listener can draw them up for us.
Hey, there we go. Now we're really collaborating. The final order of business on this edition of Big Talk. A lot of different things going on. The College World Series with softball, baseball, everything's kind of wrapping up for softball, at least, and baseball going on. There was a really neat story that took place. I suppose neat in the end, because early on it was a little bit of a heartbreak, especially for a certain community. Yeah. Sam, you wanted to talk about this.
Yeah,
you take it.
Indiana State, first time since 1986, I believe, that they'd been into a super regional, They got to host it. They were the higher seed over TCU. They get to host the super regional, and they report back to the NCAA that they cannot host it because they cannot provide enough hotel rooms for all of the players, all that fun stuff, and media and everything for it, because the Special Olympics in Indiana is going on in Terre Haute that same weekend. So the NCAA said, okay, but we've got to change. We've got to take it to Fort Worth then, because that's just the way it's got to happen. There were some fans and a group. I don't remember the group off the top of my head that kind of started the thing to where donate to the Indiana Special Olympics. And
I love when fans do this.
Yeah, and TCU, it wasn't all TCU fans, but it was started by TCU. Over $23,000 were donated to the Special Olympics for Indiana. An amazing outpouring, because it's not the Sycamore's fault that they can't host, because the Special Olympics, which is a great thing happening, was in Terre Haute. They just didn't expect the Sycamores to be still playing baseball at the time. So they reached out and they started donating, and it was just amazing that over $23,000 donated to the Special Olympics. And congratulations to the Horned Frogs for doing that, and making that happen, because they get to host a super regional, but they realize that that's the cause that it's for.
That's pretty special. Tony, do you have anything to add on to that?
That's probably the one thing that I love about certain fan bases. Not all of them, because we know some fan bases, depending on what sport you follow, whether it's professional, college, whatever, some fans are extremely hostile, and you would probably never see something as generous as this happen with some of those fan bases. But that's what you love to see, is fan bases like this that take something like that and they just run with it. It's not like Indiana State ask them to do this. It's not like they petition for people to hopefully do this. TCU just said, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to make it happen. And it's one of the things you love to see when the opponent that you're facing is like, hey, we're going to do this not because we have to, but because we think it would be cool, and because it's bigger than what we are as far as opponents. This is to better our fellow people that need help, and it's a benefit for them.
It's some awesome stuff.
Cool thing for them to do. And like I said, it wasn't just TCU fans that donated, but it was started by a couple of groups there in Fort Worth.
Well, in college sports, I feel like kind of gets drug into so much negative news, especially today, because of all the problems that are out there. So when you get a feel good like this, I feel like it's almost important for us all to cherish and kind of latch onto those stories. Well, real quick, to steal something from PTI, any notes before we end up closing down? Anything else anybody want to bring up? We got Tony's got Rutgers right there with Michigan State and Purdue.
Winning the whole thing.
Yeah. Right.
Shocking the world.
Outside of that, anything, or do we get it all? Cover the bases?
I honestly be on the lookout for conference expansions eventually. I think it's coming down the pike that eventually that there are going to be some additives to not just the Big Ten, but I think because other conferences are going to be adding teams, it will turn into the Big Ten adding more as well. So just keep a look. And don't get me wrong, we'll keep you updated a little.
Oh yeah. and to Sam's point, I think not only will it be football driven, I think because of other conferences are also, and some conference commissioners are being very basketball forward. I think, college basketball is going to be heavily affected by this too. And I think a lot of schools will actually join conferences that we probably don't expect and are probably be surprised by, based off of a college basketball front rather than a football front, which I think will also be more fun and will make things a whole heck of a lot more interesting.
And by the way, next week we'll be spending some time talking about the scheduling announcements with Big Ten football for the coming years.
There's so much that we couldn't fit it into today. So.
There's a lot to unpack there, so we'll be getting into that next week as well. But okay, as we close down another edition of Big Talk, Sam, Tony, just like old times, let us know how to close it down and find us on the internet.
Go ahead there, Tony. Start it off.
So you can find us on the TikToks, the Instagram, and the Twitters at big_talk. That is B1G_talk for all of my spelling difficulty folks like myself. You remember you have to do at B1G_talk. On Facebook, it is also Big Talk at B1G Talk. You can put the underscore. You don't have to put the underscore. It is dealer's choice. That is the beauty of Facebook. They make it so much easier with the difficulty of spelling. At least you don't have to put an underscore, which for some people, I don't even know if they know how to put an underscore on their keyboard. So
use it in a sentence, please.
Word
of origin.
For underscore?
Look, he's said he's struggling with the spelling, so go with the spelling bee.
Oh goodness, there's smoke coming out from under his his headphones. Goodness.
There's enough of that in Canada right now. Okay, we don't need any more of that right here.
We're feeling it here in Ohio, so and then probably there in Michigan too. There, Mr. Dalton.
I get the weather alerts every day so far this week saying that's
I've got the little it says polluted air. That's what it says on my desktop right now. I'm like, oh great.
They say at least we know New York really is rooting for Syracuse because they are all orange crushed right now in their field of area.
Oh, hey, you can find us on through the end of July, once a week on ASAP. Streamed on ASAP, but once football season starts back up and basketball season, we will be doing. I will be doing 2 days a week, unless we can somehow convince one of these two jokers to come back for the second day. But we'll be doing 2 days a week once the football season starts. We're on a new network, the Lounge Media Group. We are part of the Lounge Media Group, newly part, and that's you want to watch us but miss the ASAP stream, you can go find us on Spotify and watch the video, or you can listen to it like a podcast, just the same as anywhere else you find your podcasts.
Perfect. All right, that does it for another edition of Big Talk Special One, because we had the OGs back together, the original group. Sam Sprunger, Tony Hollinsworth. I'm Dalton Shetler. Thank you all for tuning in. So long.
See ya.
Bye.